Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside South China Sea, modern naval conflict in the South Pacific. This is a game designed by John Gorkowski and published by Compass Games. Recently I showed you Indian Ocean region, which is the second volume in this series. Now this is the reprint of the first game, South China Sea, which was initially published in 2017. I'd played it several years ago, but I never had my own copy, and now with the reprint, I made sure that I ordered one from Compass so I could complete the collection between this and Indian Ocean region. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. The game, South China Sea, offers players a space within which to explore options and alternatives for dealing with complex, multi-party maritime conflict in that region. Games usually begin with rounds of competitive card play, key to real-world economic, political, and diplomatic events, which may or may not escalate to military action. Should an armed clash erupt, players use hex and counter mechanics to adjudicate combat between opposing air, sea, and land forces. Of course, eager grognards could skip the card play in favor of kinetics from the start. The precise factors affecting play vary from one scenario to the next, and players could make their own. But in general, card options include things such as economic sanctions, freedom of navigation operations, the Chinese Coast Guard, high-level visits, etc., with pauses for negotiation among players, played out over turns that simulate 3 to 7 weeks of time. Military options center on the use of individual ships, missile batteries, squadrons of aircraft, or battalions of troops to deny access or assert dominance over key terrain features on a map scaled at 45 nautical miles per hex, in turns that simulate 3 to 7 hours each. There is an example of the map, the counters, and then over here on the left-hand side, a listing of the contents. We get 390 counters, 2 map sheets creating a total area of 21 by 41 inches, 39 political cards, a rule and scenario book, 2 player aid cards, and 2 dice. The time scale is 3 to 7 hours per turn, map scale is 45 nautical miles per hex, unit scale is aircraft squadrons, pairs of ships or subs, and land battalions. It is for 2 to 3 players or can be played solitaire, and the playing time is 2 to 4 hours depending on scenario. Complexity is listed as 7 out of 10, and solitaire suitability is 6 out of 10. So let's take a look inside and see what you get. And we got our 2d6, our deck of cards, a little piece of errata, our rule book, player aid cards, counter sheets, and our maps. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the map that comes with the game. You're going to take the 2 maps, you're going to lay them one on top of the other to create the overall playing surface. The area of operations goes from Myanmar through Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and the PRC, through to the Philippines and Indonesia on the far right, as well as Malaysia down here at the bottom. The top right, you have the U.S. task force boxes, and on the left top, you have the PRC task force boxes. You also have the transit tracks for Okinawa, as well as Guam, and then you have a map key along the left-hand side, the turn track, and then the victory point track on the left-hand side as well. Now we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game. On the front, we have the default order, the land attack cruise missile maximum range, air sea engagement sequence, the military turn sequence of play, the elimination radius and hexes, and then the move category at the bottom right. And on the back, we have a breakdown of the counters. For naval, we have surface and subsurface, and then we have aircraft and ground. Now we'll take a look at the political cards. These work just as they do in Indian Ocean region. It's the same game system, so it's going to be real familiar to those who've seen the Indian Ocean region preview. For basing here, we have only a regional power, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, can play this card. Others may trade or discard to pass, and the card playing nation invites 1 global power per card play to transfer any 2 of its units from its order of battle onto the map into any one of the card player's ports. And at the bottom it says roll 1d6. If greater than 2, then move the victory point track total 1 point in the direction of the invited global power, otherwise move 1 point in favor of the not invited power. Remember, just like in Indian Ocean region, 0 to 5 is in favor of the US, 15 to 20 is in favor of China, and 6 to 14 is in favor of the regional powers, which are made up of Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam. Next, we have the American card, and it says only the USA may play this card, others may trade or discard to pass. A U.S. vessel cruises through contested waters, disregarding sovereignty claims to reinforce freedom of navigation. Decrease the victory point track total by 3 and roll for armed conflict. Any roll greater than 4, armed conflict begins. High-level visit, same thing as it was with Indian Ocean region. Only a global power, PRC or USA, may play this card. Others may trade or discard to pass. One of your cabinet level or higher officials visits the region. Roll 1d6. If greater than 3, then move the victory point track total 1 point in your favor, otherwise no change. And then Chinese Coast Guard, another thing that could be a tipping point here. Only the PRC may play this card, others may trade or discard to pass. Chinese Coast Guard cutters maintain a continuous presence over disputed waters to deter foreign commercial operations. Increase the victory point track by 3 points and roll for armed conflict. Again, greater than 4, armed conflict ensues. Now we'll take a look at the counters that come with the game. Unlike the Indian Ocean region one, you can pick these up and not worry about them falling out. They do look like they will punch very easy, but you don't have to be as careful as you did with the Indian Ocean region ones. United States forces on the left, and that carries over to the top right. Then we also have Philippine and Vietnamese forces. On the next counter sheet, we have PRC forces as well as Malaysian forces on the bottom right. And on the third counter sheet, we have administrative markers that you'll be using to track different states in the game. Now we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 32-page full-color rulebook. The inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents. Then we get to game conventions, the map. Remember, the hexes are 45 nautical miles across. The boundaries for the different nations, and then the home country. There's some examples here. Then we have Guam and Okinawa transit track, and the victory point track. Remember, 0 to 5 is in favor of the U.S., 15 to 20 is in favor of PRC, and 6 to 14 are for the other nations. Then we have the military events and the game components on page 5. Then we get to control and political turns. The political cards you're going to play, and that's going to move the victory point track up and down, which is going to give you a bit of a buffer once hostilities start, because losses will count against you on the victory point track. I love kinetic combat. That's why I play war games, not for the political maneuvering stuff. I'm not into that political type of game very much. However, I like this aspect added into the game because you know hostilities are going to kick off, but you can kind of build that little buffer, and I think that's a really neat aspect for South China Sea and Indian Ocean region. Military turn context, it's going to break down all the enemy and friendly neutral, the preparation units, the naval units, an example of all the different names for the units like CG is guided missile cruiser, CV aircraft carrier, so on and so forth. Breakdown of the components and how to read them. Then we get into the hex types, a little bit of explanation for the terrain. Situational awareness, illumination, evasion, and hiding. You can see these are just like the Indian Ocean region rules. They're using the same system. Low and no ammo, military turn sequence of play, starting on page 13. Air movement phase, sea movement phase, the transport phase. And you can see these little design notes that are sprinkled throughout. Land attack cruise missile strike phase, air and sea combat phase, life cycle of air-sea engagement, focus, evasion. And we have the anti-air strikes in stealth order, air-sea combat sequence, torpedo strikes by submarines in stealth, gun strikes, torpedoes, anti-ground strikes, airdrops, ground movement phase, ground combat phase, military negotiations, and then special operations forces. And then the example of play starts on page 20, and it goes on for several pages. And if you notice, this is the same example of play that you're going to find in Indian Ocean region because they share the same rule set. Even though the counters are different and the area of operations is different, the example of play will teach you the same mechanics. Scenario 1, flat top down, gives you the order of battle for all the nations. Scenario 2, small boys throwing big punches. Scenario 3, convoy duty. Scenario 4, Spratly missile crisis. Scenario 5 is kung fu fighting, because everybody was kung fu fighting. And then scenario 007 is the islands of Dr. No. And then on the back, we have the victory points for military events and the strike table. And that is a look at everything you get inside of South China Sea, modern naval conflict in the South Pacific. This is a game designed by John Gorkowski and published by Compass Games. Played this game initially when it came out, and unfortunately I was not able to get a copy of it before it went out of print. Really enjoyed my play of it. It was a lot of fun, even though I played one of the minor nations and just pretty much sat back and watched the PRC and the US just go back and forth with the battles. we weren't able to really make a lot of an influence on it. And it was kind of one of those late night games that we were just having a lot of fun, drinking some whiskey, and there was a lot of trash talking going on. But I really enjoyed it. I could see the potential for a lot of fun with this game. And now that it's back in print, I made sure I got a copy of this to go along with IOWAR, so I have both now. It uses the same rules, so you're learning the system and you can carry it from game to game. And that's the best part about series games. You learn the base mechanics, you can carry it from game to game and only learn any of the minor nuances or new rules that have been added, maybe new cards, new units, things like that will change up the way the game plays a little bit from game to game. But each one will have its own unique identity and it'll be using the same system of rules. So that's really fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and also it's sandboxy. So different units, different scenarios can be added by gamers out there. And if you look on BGG and CSW, you'll see that people have done that. They've added some new units and some new scenarios to extend the gameplay quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to getting this one on the table and playing it again. It's a really good game. It's a lot of fun. If you like modern naval combat, you definitely want to check out South China Sea or Indian Ocean region. Obviously, Indian Ocean region, the main protagonist is going to be India against China. Here in the South China Sea, it's going to be the US against China with the other minor nations in between. But it can play solitaire all the way up to 3 players. So if you like this type of game, it's definitely one to check out before it goes back out of print. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you'd be curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.